Welcome back to Vic Curiosity, and just like the Indian cricket team, Vikram Dev Mahapatra is back with a resolve after a bike accident to continue this series, and he's going to again speak about something which he loves talking about, which is cricket. So we are 1-1, leveled up, all set up for the pink ball test match at the Motira, and we are back in the reckoning for the World Test Championships with New Zealand already there, and there is a certain permutation combination which can get us there. I wonder if the Indian think tank is really spending a little time thinking about how they can actually qualify, or are they just thinking of going series by series, looking at this series in isolation? Let's get this under our belt and then look at the next thing that we are at. But just to speak about India versus England, the rivalry, there's so much to it. In fact, my own personal journey started with the India versus England series back in 84-85. I was in my fifth standard and had just started to explore television, which had arrived in a house with a Konark television, and I'd started to watch cricket. And it started with the 84-85 series. Mohammad Azharuddin was making his debut and smashed those sensational first three consecutive centuries in that series. But it was quite a series because it was on the backdrop of a lot of things which were happening around, which were very disturbing. The assassination of Indira Gandhi, and just before the Mumbai Test match, it was Percy, the Deputy High Commissioner of UK, who had been shot down in Mumbai. And there was a big question mark around the series that it might even be called off. And the English team actually went off to Sri Lanka, much like this series, coming from Sri Lanka. And then they played the 5 Test matches, which was eventually won 2-1 by England back in 84-85. They lost the first Test match in Mumbai. Some good performances by our Lakshman Shivarama Krishnan, and I remember a century, I think it was Ravi Shastri, who was beginning to show his caliber in terms of batting. And Shastri had, I think, got his 5th century by that time. And we went into the Firoz Shah Kotla, which is the Arun Jaitley Stadium now, and we lost that Test match. Some fantastic off-spin bowling by Pat Pocock and Phil Edmonds, and the series was just set up, just like the way this series is set up, was just set up. And I think we drew the next Test match at the Eden Gardens, where Azhar debuted with a century, and then we went on to Chennai, 1-1, and we lost that Test match. So there are always some great statistics around India versus England. In fact, in that Test match in Chennai at the Chipok, you had two double centurions for England. You had the great Mike Gatting, who hadn't scored a century after 15 matches, coming back and scoring his first century in the Mumbai Test match, and then coming back to score a double century. And you had Graham, I think it was Graham Flower, who scored a double century. And we lost that Test match. And we went into Kanpur, where again we had Azhar scoring a century. I think Vengsarkar scored a century, and it was a draw. But it was a huge win for the Englishmen, because they were coming back from a backdrop of a huge number of losses, including a drubbing by the West Indians 5-0 in England. For them to come back from behind and win a series was quite a story in those days. And it led to the following month, the World Cricket Championships in Australia, which happened, and which for my generation was like the IPL, because you had colored clothing, you had those fancy scoreboards, and you had even a cartoon duck walking along with somebody who'd scored a duck. So that's what the World Championships of cricket got us addicted to cricket, a whole generation. And seeing Shastri win the man of the series, us beating Pakistan in the final. I still remember the ball Kapil Dev bowled to Qasim Omar, which clean bowled him in the final. I remember a hoarding in the stands which said bus conductors versus tram drivers, which was to identify the Pakistani and Indian population in Australia, which is very different today. So when one looks back at this whole rivalry, and we went on to England in 1986 and we won the series there. That's another great series. Uh, Vingsarkar scoring his, I think, third consecutive century at the Lords. Some brilliant performances by our great Mohammad Azharuddin. And we happened to walk away with that series of 2-0. So there's always so much. I mean, one looks at the series which happened in 84, 85. There were a lot of key players like Ian Botham, like Graham Gooch missing. There was this huge talk about the great Geoffrey Boycott, who had also again happened to step out of the series in 82, 83 because of a rebel tour which was happening against South Africa. Understand that South Africa was banned from cricket because of apartheid policy. And there were a rebel bunch of cricketers who wanted to do a tour with South Africa. And for that reason, some good players of England weren't there. In fact, Neil Foster played his one test match in Chipok, which actually won the test match and the series for England in that 84-85 series. So if you look at this great rivalry, now who taught us cricket? The English brought it to us, and we started to play. We played our first test match in 1932 at the Lords. I spoke about the great story of Mohammad Nisar taking those two brilliant wickets of the two openers when the test match started. In fact, the openers, Sutcliffe and I think it was Percy, they had scored around 555 runs in a previous county match. So that was the story by which India actually started their cricket journey. And if you look at there have been some shockers and some stunners which have stood out. Whether you look at the two double centuries in the 84-85 Chipok test match, or you look at Kapil Dev in the 82-83 series in Old Trafford, scored 89 runs of 55 balls. Had he gone on to make a century, he would have scored the fastest century, over a mile, beating Kanhai and Roy Frederick's record for the fastest century. Sandeep Patils hit 6 boundaries in an over against Bob Willis in the 82-83 series. So there are a lot of stories when you look at India versus England rivalry. In fact, we won our first test match at the Kotla in a home series in 1952 against the Englishmen. We won our first home series again. It was won at Chipok in 62-63, thanks to Mansoor Ali Khan Patodi and Salim Durrani, who were stars in that series. There is a shocker which happened in the 52 series where Fred Truman came out to bowl. He got a call. He was serving the Royal Air Force in Germany, and he got a call to play the test match, and he landed up. And he got us reeling at 0 for 4 wickets down. So there are stories and stories as you keep looking at India versus England. And the great performance of Graham Gooch in the 90 series, where he scored 333 and he scored another 128. That's the highest aggregate of runs in a test match, close to 456 runs. Our great Mohammad Azharuddin himself scored 120 odd runs in 111 balls at the Lords, which the great billionaire Paul Getty said after watching that innings. And it's the same test match where Graham Gooch has scored 333 and 128, that he said that, I think now I can call it a day. I mean, what he meant was his life is complete, having seen Azharuddin score that century at Lords. So when you keep looking at the facts, the data, there's so much in this rivalry. The last home series won in India was by England in 2012. Some of the biggest runs scored against us Indians is Alistair Cook on our soil. One of the finest innings played by an Englishman on Indian soil is Kevin Peterson's 188 in Mumbai. Our own Virat Kohli's double century at Mumbai is another fine knock which one can remember. Ian Botham taking 10 wickets and scoring a century in the Jubilee Test match in Mumbai in 1980. You had the great Keith Fletcher saying that there's no way that the ball could turn much, looking at Anil Kumble in the 92-93 series, and Anil Kumble walked away with the Man of the Series award. So you look back, there are stories as you keep looking at it, and I think it comes down to this Chepauk Test match. What did it teach us? You had a Ravichandran Ashwin saying, I owe it all to the batting coach Vikram Rathore. I'm wondering if Vikram Rathore is feeling good about that fact that the other batsmen didn't really apply themselves to the lessons he gave Ravichandran Ashwin. And how about Rohit Sharma being himself, scoring that wonderful, sublime 160 odd runs? You had Virat Kohli giving an absolute lesson of batting, controlled batting on a pitch which was doing everything. And I think the English had lessons from the Indian spinners, while I think all the batsmen had lessons from the few who were able to hang around. So it comes down to the bottom line. When you look at this Chepauk Test match, there are three things which I would like to highlight looking at the Chepauk Test match. Has Indian cricket arrived, or do we still need to look at how we apply ourselves? If you look at the collective runs scored by the balanced batsmen, leaving aside a Ravichandran Ashwin, Rohit Sharma or a Virat Kohli, most of them were struggling. You look at the spinning combination that we had. Was it the best combination did we have? These are questions. And that's one of the reasons why I continue to say cricket is an university. Most school students and college students need to go watch a test match to learn about a cauldron in life where there are too many variables, right from the pitch to the combination of the players, to the given conditions, to the given situation of the match. And it shows what character comes out of each match, what character comes out of each team. And me being a Manchester City fan, I'm very excited with them leading the league in the English Premier League. And I look forward to these lessons being learned by the Indian cricket team if we hope to dominate the next decade in Indian cricket. So I'll be back with another session, but this time on tennis. Watch out for Vic Curiosity. You're going to keep hearing this man speaking. See you again.